Hi everyone. Your Chapter 13 interactive lecture will be based on two different videos that are available on the course Human Resource Management YouTube site. The first video will be on individual compensation incentive pay plans, and the second video will be on the balanced scorecard. Hi everybody. Thanks for joining me here for this discussion on individual incentive pay plans. Now, an incentive pay plan, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, is a pay structure that is designed to compensate our employees based upon performance in an effort to motivate them and fairly reward them. So a well-designed incentive pay plan will be strongly tied to important performance metrics so that in their efforts to achieve these incentives, our employees will improve the performance that we care about the most. Okay, the first of these that we're going to discuss here today is called a piecework rate plan or a piece rate plan. Okay, and essentially what happens here is employees are paid based upon what they produce. This works really well in environments like factories and warehouses where there are basic standard routine things that employees need to do. So to give you an example of a piece rate plan, let's imagine that we have an employee working in a warehouse and they've got a pallet jack here, and their job is to pick packages that get palletized, wrapped up, and shipped out to customers. Okay, so if we were putting together a piece rate plan, we might pay our employee 10 cents per package picked. Okay, and maybe over the course of an 8-hour shift, the employee is able to pick 1,920 packages, and because we're paying them 10 cents per package shipped, they are able to earn $192, and that works out to about $24 per hour. Okay, the example that we just provided here is what we would call a straight piecework plan. And the reason we call it a straight piecework plan is because no matter how much the employee produces, they get paid the same amount per unit that they've produced, or in this case, per package picked. But sometimes we want to set a target and pay our employees a little more if they exceed it. And the idea here is that we have a target that we think is what one person can do, but we say, if all of our employees exceed that target by a little bit, we can avoid hiring a new person. And it's a little bit less expensive to pay our employees a little bit more to be more productive than it is to bring a new person on board. So in this example, what we would do is we'd start with setting our goal. And our goal here, we'll say, is 200 packages per hour, or 200 items per hour. And that works out to be 1,600 items for the entire 8-hour shift. And what we do here is we say, we're going to pay 10 cents per package picked up to the goal. So the first 1,600 items in an 8-hour shift are going to get paid at 10 cents per item. But everything that exceeds that 1,600 items is going to be paid at 15 cents per package. Okay. Now our employee goes and picks the same 1,920 packages that they picked in the previous example, only this time we calculate their pay a little bit differently. It's 1,600 times 10 cents plus 320 times 15 cents, 320 obviously being the number of packages that they exceeded their goal by, and that gives them $208 for the entire shift. So in this case, we've given our employees a little bit of an incentive to exceed their goal, and because we've given them that incentive, they've helped us not have to hire an additional person. All right, and when we put these types of piece rate plans together, they're called differential piece rate plans because we have one level that we pay up to a certain point, and then when employees exceed that point, we pay another level. Okay, building on the piece rate plans, we have something called a standard hour plan. And with a standard hour plan, what we do is we kind of calculate how long it takes to do a specific task, and then each time an employee completes that task, we pay them for the amount of time that we've estimated the task should take. So if a task is estimated to take 30 minutes, but it only takes an employee 20 minutes, each time they complete that task, they get paid for 30 minutes. All right, so let's give an example here, and we'll say we have a basic computer service call that we estimate should take about 30 minutes, okay? And an employee completes 18 basic computer service calls in 7 hours. At the end of that 7-hour shift, the employee actually gets paid for 18 calls times a half an hour per call. They actually get paid for 9 hours, even though they only worked 7 hours. And that's because we estimated that these basic service calls should take 30 minutes. So 18 of them should take 9 hours, but we're paying the employee per call. And they only took 7 hours to do all 18. So they earn 7 hours they earn 9 hours worth of pay in 7 hours time because of their productivity here. So some of the drawbacks to piece rate plans and standard hours plans might be that employees may perform work at lower quality in order to increase their quantity. So, for example, if we go back to our warehouse example, maybe the employee who's being paid on a piece rate plan doesn't look at the quality of the packages that they're picking to ship out. They don't differentiate between what is appropriate to send to a customer and what's not. They're just looking to quickly get all of the number of packages that they need. You know, maybe they're a little, because they're rushing, they're more likely to have a few mispicks here and there. In the case of the computer service call example, perhaps the basic call is not as thorough as it would be if we were paying the employee by hour, so our customers get a little bit lower quality. The other thing that can happen is the incentives may cause competition among employees for resources. So if we go back to the warehouse example, maybe we have some good pallet jacks and some bad pallet jacks in the warehouse, and the employees realize that they need to have a good pallet jack in order to be productive. So they start competing for those pallet jacks. They're hiding them when they have to use the restroom or take a lunch break. So we don't have our best machines on the floor at all times because of the competition created by this. Okay, another type of incentive plan that we have is called a commission plan. Now, a commission plan is a form of compensation where the percentage of sales or the profit or a percentage of the profit from the sales is how we determine the employee's compensation. Now, this is different from a piece rate plan. A piece rate plan focuses on the number of units produced, whereas commission plans focus on dollars generated. Okay, and dollars are not units, so commission plans are different from piece rate plans. So let's walk through an example of what a commission plan would look like. And let's say we have a salesperson, and this salesperson is producing $2 million a year in sales. They're on a commission rate of 7%. What we would do to figure out their compensation is we would take the $2 million, multiply it by 7%, and the employee's compensation would be $140,000. All right, this here is an example of what we would call a straight commission plan, because the employee is only paid commission. There's no base salary or any other compensation associated with how the employee is paid. Now, we can compare different types of commission plans, however. We have the straight commission plan that we just talked about, and we can have what's called a salary plus commission plan, where the employee gets a base salary and then earns commission for their sales. So in a straight commission plan, the salary is obviously going to be $0. In a salary plus commission plan, let's say for this example that the base salary is going to be $50,000. Okay. Now we're going to look at the commission rates as we spelled out before. The commission rate in the straight commission plan that we're using for our example is 7%. Because the salary plus commission plan has a base salary, the commission tends to be lower in these plans. So we're going to say the commission in this plan for our example is 4%. Okay, now we're going to look at what happens if the employee sells $2 million worth of product in each of these cases. Okay, in the straight commission plan, as we laid out before, the employee would earn $140,000. In the salary plus commission plan, though, it actually works out to be a little bit less, because we take the 4%, we multiply it by the $2 million, and that gives us $80,000. Then we add that to the $50,000 salary, and in this case, the employee only earns $130,000. So does that mean that straight commission plans are always better than salary plus commission plans? That's not necessarily the case for our employees. If we were to pull that same example, only lower the employee's sales to $1.5 million, what we would see is that the commission on the straight commission plan would work out to be $105,000. However, on the salary plus commission plan, the employee would earn 4% of the $1.5 million, which is $60,000. We would add that to the $50,000 base salary, and the employee would earn $110,000. So in this case, the employee actually would earn a little more on a salary plus commission plan. Okay, what some companies do from time to time is they might offer their employees a choice between a straight commission plan and a salary plus commission plan. And what this does is this creates a scenario where the employee can have the security of salary while they're building a sales base and becoming good at their job. But as they become more successful, they can transition to a commission plan where they have the opportunity to earn more, but they're also a little more motivated to be productive because they're getting a larger percentage of their sales. Now, another type of individual incentive plan that we're going to talk about here is called merit pay. And merit pay is a situation where employees' annual increases are based upon their performance ratings. Okay, so we're going to take a look at what merit pay looks like in reality. And in this example, we're gonna have a little chart here, and we've got employee ratings over on the left. So we've got our top performers, our satisfactory performers, and our employees who need improvement. Okay, and then we're gonna look at how much our employees get paid, and we've got them divided up into three different columns here based upon their compa ratio. And if you're not familiar with a compa ratio, I've got a video on that posted on YouTube that you can check out. But essentially, over on the left here, we've got a compa ratio of less than 0.90, which means the employee is kind of underpaid. Here we've got a compa ratio that's between 0.9 and 1.1, which means the employee's paid pretty close to the average or the target. And then over here, we got a compa ratio that's greater than 1.1, which means these employees are a little bit overpaid. Okay, so as we put together the merit pay systems here, what we would do is we would say maybe our top performers who are underpaid get a 10% increase. All right, our top performers who are paid near the average get a 7% increase, and our top performers who are overpaid get only a 4% increase. Then we might say, okay, we're going to have our satisfactory performers who are on average get a 5% increase. Our satisfactory performers who are overpaid only get a 2% increase. And our satisfactory performers who are underpaid get a 7% increase. Then the employees who are underpaid but still need some improvement in their performance, we'll still let them get a 3% increase, but the rest of our employees who need improvement are not going to get an increase at all. Okay, and this is a basic layout that we can look at for some merit pay increases, but it's very important that you note that poorly designed merit pay systems can create equity issues in your organization. And I'm going to show you a couple examples of how that can happen here. All right, so let's imagine that the midpoint for our salaries is $100,000, and that's what our compa ratio is based off of. And you see the chart that we have here has our percentage increases laid out the way that we showed them previously. And let's say we're looking at our underpaid employees are making about $85,000 before merit pay increases. Our employees who are paid near the average are paid at $100,000, which is right at the midpoint. And those who are a little bit overpaid are currently making about $115,000. Let's calculate out what their merit pay increases would be and see how that might impact our employees. Our top performers who are underpaid are going to get an $8,500 increase, and those who are paid on average are going to get a $7,000 increase, which is pretty nice. But when we look at our overpaid employees, they're only going to get a $4,600 increase because we're compensating for the fact that they're overpaid a little bit. Now, all of a sudden, when we look at our satisfactory employees who are either underpaid or paid on average, they're getting increases of $5,900 or $5,000, which are actually higher increases than some of our top performers are getting. So that can create a little bit of a perception of equity issue. Okay, then our satisfactory employees who are overpaid are only getting a $2,300 increase. And then we've got underpaid employees who need improvement who are getting a $2,500 increase, which is, again, higher than what we're seeing some of our satisfactory employees get. So we're in a situation where we have underperforming employees getting higher pay increases than some of our satisfactory employees. And these types of situations can create some perceptions of equity issues here. Okay, now let's move forward, and we're going to break this down a little bit, because remember our compa ratios have a little bit of a range to them. So what I did here is I laid out what some of our increases would look like and what some of the resulting salaries would look like when our employees are kind of on the margins. Okay, and what I mean by that is when we're looking at compa ratios of less than 0.9 when the midpoint is $100,000, we're basically saying all employees who are earning under $90,000. And then here we're looking at employees who are earning $90,000 to $110,000. And here we're looking at employees who are earning more than $110,000. Okay, so you can see we've laid out the chart a little bit differently. So we have all of our employees who are underpaid are just barely under that compa ratio of 0.9. They're all at $89,000. Then our employees who are on average, they pretty much run the entire range. We've got one here who's at 91,000, one here who's at 109,000, and another who's at 91,000. And then we set all of our overpaid employees to be just barely over the compa ratio of 1.1. So they're all at $111,000. All right, so now we're going to take a look and we're going to see with these increases that we've laid out in this chart, what does this look like for the resulting salaries? So our top performer who was underpaid gets a pretty large increase, and their salary is now up to $97,900. So they're no longer underpaid. Interestingly enough, though, our top performer who was paid within the average, compa ratio of over 0.9 but under 1.1, got a much smaller increase, and they're now at $97,370. So the result of that is that our previously underpaid top performer is now making more than our previously average paid top performer, simply because of where they fell on that line of compa ratios, not because of merit or anything of that nature. Okay, now we're going to take a look at our employee who needs improvement but is underpaid, got an increase that brought them up to $91,670. And our employee who needs improvement but was previously paid within the mid-range compa ratios at $91,000. So again, we have a situation where one employee's pay actually passed another employee's pay just because of where they fell on this compa ratio line. It had nothing to do with performance. Okay. Then we've got, we're going to fill in these blocks here where needs improvement, who's overpaid, is still making $111,000. And our satisfactory employee who is underpaid moves up to $95,000. All right. And then we're going to take a look at our satisfactory employee who is paid pretty much on average. They were at the top end of where their compa ratio could be and still be in that middle column. And they moved up to $114,450. Now, our satisfactory employee who was in the right column where they were a little bit overpaid only moved up to $113,220. So that person, again, in the middle column, they actually surpassed the person on the right, not because of anything that had to do with performance, but just because of where they fell on the lines of the compa ratio there. Okay, and then finally, our top performer who was a little overpaid only moved up to $115,440. So that satisfactory employee who was almost overpaid but not quite overpaid is almost making as much as that top performer who was overpaid previously. And again, has nothing to do with performance, just has to do with where they fell on that compa ratio line. Okay, so some of the drawbacks to merit pay. You kind of saw this here. They could be perceived as punishing employees for prior performance. So if we're working on a merit pay system, one of the things that we are dealing with here in this merit pay system is that employees' pay increases as their performance is positive, right? So our top performing employees are going to be overpaid, and then over time we're going to give them lower increases because we've classified them as being overpaid. That can be perceived as punishing them for their prior performance. The other drawback to merit pay is that it can be expensive as raises accumulate. Okay, so one alternative to merit pay that we do have is we can have bonus systems for a one-time payout, and we can give these bonuses out based upon performance rating or for achieving performance objectives. But the idea here is that we essentially look at whatever goal it is that our employees set out to achieve, and when they achieve it, we give them a one-time payout. And because of this, we're not building upon previous performance as we give these payouts out. The company saves a little money this way. This may be perceived as more equitable by employees at times. However, employees do stand to benefit less from the accumulation of bonuses as compared to merit pay. Finally, some additional incentives that we can offer our employees that we might see are things such as suggestion bonuses. And these occur when companies solicit suggestions from employees, and if those suggestions are implemented and save the company money or result in increased revenue, the employees get a bonus. Another thing that employees can get is a referral bonus. A referral bonus might be if we were looking to hire, maybe we offer a $3,000 bonus to any employee who refers a potential candidate to the company, and that candidate ends up getting hired. Okay, so this has been a little session here on incentive pay plans, showing some of the different ways that we can use individual incentives to improve performance within the organization. Hope you learned something and enjoyed the video. Thanks for joining us, and we'll talk to you soon. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining me here for this lesson on the balanced scorecard. For those of you who aren't familiar with the balanced scorecard, it is essentially a method of evaluating our employees that includes a variety of different performance measures and sometimes even has comparative information or information about reference points. So, if we're evaluating a group of employees, we might actually have multiple different employees or business units listed on the balanced scorecard so that we can contextualize the data that's included in the scorecard. So what exactly is included in the balanced scorecard? We're going to start with financial data. This can include sales data, profitability data, basically anything that is key in terms of the financial performance of the organization or the employee. All right, next we're going to look at customer data. And customer data can come from letters and feedback that are provided by customers. Customer data can come in the forms of surveys that are completed. We'll also look at process and operations data, as well as sometimes there's learning and training data included in the balanced scorecard. Now that's a little less common than some of the other points that we talked about before, but it does show up there on the balanced scorecard from time to time. And we'll also see referent data. And as I mentioned before, referent data kind of tells us how the individual being evaluated is performing compared to other individuals. So in the example that I'm going to display here in just a moment, we're going to be looking at a balanced scorecard for managers, and the balanced scorecard has performance data for each manager's business unit, and it provides performance data for 10 different units so they can be compared. So why do we want to use a balanced scorecard as opposed to a more simple form of performance evaluation? The balanced scorecard obviously is a little more complex than some of the things we're used to, but for those of you who are familiar with expectancy theory, you may recall that people's behaviors get driven by the rewards that they're going to receive. So if we know that a certain behavior is going to result in a reward, we tend to focus on making sure we execute that behavior and that we execute it well. If we know that other behaviors are not going to be tied to rewards, we tend not to focus on them quite so much. So when we have performance measures that are only capturing a few different behaviors, our employees can target the work they do and not focus on the diversity of their job on the whole. What the balanced scorecard does is by incorporating 20, 30, sometimes 40 or 50 different performance metrics, it shows our employees that their rewards are going to be tied to a multitude of different behaviors and performance measures. So they have to focus on all of these things and not just look at a few key aspects of the job. Okay, so I want to move forward by looking at an example of a balanced scorecard. And the example I'm going to show here is based upon back in the time when I was in industry. Okay, so this is a fictional balanced scorecard, but it's modeled after one that we actually used. It's a little bit simplified. It's got about half of the performance metrics that we actually had on ours when I was in industry. And as you'll see over on the left here, these are the reference points that I was discussing earlier. So this is a balanced scorecard that was used for managers, and what we have is data on all of the managers' different locations, their business units. And you can see we have 10 different locations listed here and the same 10 locations listed down here. We also have aggregate performance for the district. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to look at one location's performance, compare it to the average or the aggregate performance for the district, and also it allows you to look and see where it ranks compared to its peers. Okay, up on the top, you see we've got a section devoted to sales, a section devoted to operations, a section devoted to inventory, which would again be tied to operations. We have our customer section down here, and then a couple more sales sections over here. Ultimately, there's roughly about 30 different metrics displayed on this particular example of the balanced scorecard. And what we're going to do here as we move forward is we're just going to kind of walk through how to read the balanced scorecard. So I've highlighted location 10, and we're just going to go through location 10 metric by metric to understand what all these different things mean. So we're going to start by zooming in on the sales section, which would reflect some of the financial points that we spoke about earlier. And as we look here, what we'll see is here's location 10 highlighted. The first metric that we have is actual sales, and then in parentheses it says times 1,000. Okay, the sales for this unit aren't actually 16,000, they are $16 million. That's what the times 1,000 means. Generally speaking, we wouldn't typically evaluate a unit on its actual sales because there are a lot of different factors that can go in there. We'll have that in there so that we can contextualize it, but what we'll take a look at over here is the sales plan percentage. And what that means is it's telling you basically how did the location do compared to its sales target. Okay, so in this case, location 10 you can see is positive 2.4%. What that means is that it's exceeding its sales target by 2.4%. Generally speaking, that seems pretty good. As we go down and look location by location, we've got negative, negative. This one is beating location 10. We've got negative, 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 negative. These two are positive, but not quite as good as location 10. So location 10 essentially ranks second out of 10 in sales plan percentage. And as you can see, it's beating the district average by quite a bit. Next, we have our sales comp percentage. And what this is telling us is what the different location sales look like compared to the previous year. This is different from our sales plan because this is compared to the previous year, whereas the sales plan is looking at a goal. Sometimes goals differ from comps for a variety of reasons. There can be environmental factors that impact what we're going to project sales to be, and so on. But as we look here, we see location 10 is at 5.8% comps, which is pretty good. If we're comparing that to the district, it's almost 3 times what the rest of the district is comping at. And again, it's second to just location 3. Next, we have transaction comp percent, which basically is telling you how many transactions each unit is capturing compared to the previous year. So how many invoices are they running, things like that. Okay, and here location 10 is at positive 4.5%, and that's more than twice what the district average is. And as we look down the list here, it looks like that's actually the highest in the district, so it ranks number 1. Okay. Next, we're going to look at average sale. And what average sale tells us is for each transaction that is run, what is the average dollar amount per sale. And as we look at location 10 here, we see they're at $57.69. That's actually about $2 less than the district average. So this is the first place where we're seeing location 10 not performing as well as the district average. And as we look through here, we can see there's 4 different locations performing worse than location 10. So they're kind of right in the middle of the pack on this. So this is an area of opportunity for them. And it's one that may have gone unrecognized if we were just simply evaluating them based upon their sales. Okay. Next, we have the average sale comp percentage, which is telling us how much did this number change from the previous year. But as we look at this, what we see is that location 10 actually comped 1.3%, which is considerably more than the district average. And there's, again, location 3 is the only location beating them on that. So even though their average sales are low, understanding the comps helps us to contextualize this and see that their sales numbers here aren't all that bad. And then we're looking at .com sales or internet sales. And these are, again, comp percentage, so showing a comparison to the previous year. And all of the different locations are comping pretty high. But what we do see is that, again, location 10 is performing a little worse than the district average, and it appears to be somewhere in the middle of the pack. So that's another area for opportunity that we may not have noticed had we just been focused on sales plan and comp percentage. All right, next we're going to move forward into some more financial metrics here. And essentially what we have here is we have some focus class comps. And what these are telling us are that there are 6 different classes that the company wanted all of their locations to be focused on improving sales in. So like 6 different categories that they wanted a focus on. And as we look down here, what we can see is that essentially, with the exception of class 4 and class 6, location 10 is beating the district average, and in many cases beating it by quite a bit. Location 4 is actually performing pretty poorly as they have a negative comp, but you can see that they're not the only location with a negative comp. There are 3 other locations with a negative comp. So this seems to be a little bit of a problem, and having that reference data helps us to contextualize that. And then when we look at class 6, we can see that they're pretty much on the lower middle of the pack when we compare them to everyone else, and just barely underneath the district average. Now we can come over here to commercial sales, and we see compared to their plan on commercial sales, location 10 is at 2%, so they're 2% above their plan. And as we scroll down here, there's only one, again, location 3, and then we have location 6, are the only locations performing better than location 10 here on sales plan. So they're in the third position and well ahead of the district average. But their comps are at 5.1%, meaning that their commercial sales have increased 5.1% compared to the previous year, and that actually leads the district and is considerably higher than the district average. All right, next we're going to move forward into looking at some of the operational information that's included on this balanced scorecard. And the first thing here we have is controllable operational profit. Okay, now this actually is a financial metric, but in this particular case, we had it bundled in with our operations. We can see location 10 is at positive 6.6% compared to plan, which is the highest in the district and ahead of the district average by far. Core sales adjusted hours, this is an area just basically looking to see if they were staffing their location the way they should be staffing it, and they were ahead in this. Only one location 2 was higher than location 10, and we see location 10 is beating the district average by far. Now these two red areas here, these are areas where we're actually looking for lower numbers. Okay, and we see total sales adjusted hours, meaning basically hours against budget. We could see that location 10 is at negative 2.5%, which is lower than any other location and considerably lower than the district average. We see that their markdowns compared to their plan are also negative, and that's lower than the district average. They are in a tie for second place there. And then they have an APM walk score, which is basically an operations score based upon an auditor. And they're pretty much in the middle of the pack here and very close to the district average. As we look at inventory, we can see where their turns are. Their turns are very high at 41. That leads the district and is twice what the district average is. Their shrink is very low at 0.3%. Okay, that's about half of what the district average is, and they beat their plan by a considerable amount. Okay, inventory, they're a little bit over inventory here. You can see at 1.1%. However, that's considerably lower than location 1. It's considerably lower than location 5. It's about half of where locations 7 and 8 are at, and it is lower than the district average. So even though they're above their plan here, which is not great performance, when we look at those reference points and compare them, that's not bad. And then we look at their total out of stocks. They had 141. We're looking for a low number here, and that's a little bit lower than the district average. Okay. Finally, we're going to move forward into some of the customer metrics here and see how to read those. And what we see when we look at the customer metrics is that we see, first we have LTR, which is a likelihood to recommend. We have their average score, and then the comp showing what it changed. Okay, location 10 is pretty low on LTR. They're 0.2 below the district average almost, and their comps are pretty low as well. While the district comped 2%, location 10 only comped 0.23%. All right, service score is pretty close to the district average, as is their service score comp. Their speed score rated by customers is a little bit lower than the district average, which may be why their likelihood to recommend is low. And we see that their comps here are similar to their likelihood to recommend comp and much lower than the district average. All right, we see how much praise they get compared to complaints from customers, and the ratio there is 6. The high ratio is good. That's about double the ratio for the rest of the district, and it appears to be a tie for second in the district. So ultimately, what we see here by looking at the balanced scorecard is there's definitely a few areas in terms of customer feedback, mostly in likelihood to recommend and speed, where we have some opportunities here in location 10. But if we had just been focused on the sales numbers, we may have never seen that manager had that opportunity to fix those areas. So in summary, as we're looking at the balanced scorecard here, key takeaways are that the balanced scorecard provides feedback on multiple performance areas, and it allows us to identify deficiencies that we may not have identified if we were only looking at a few key areas. Okay. It also can prevent employees from focusing on only a few key metrics. So in the example that we just walked through, the manager of location 10 really could have ignored that customer feedback if we were just focused on on sales and profitability data, but because they're being evaluated on the whole picture of the balanced scorecard, they can't ignore that. They can't ignore that data because it is going to be tied to their performance evaluations and ultimately to their compensation. So I hope this helped explain how to use a balanced scorecard and what it looks like. Hope you enjoyed, and we'll talk to you soon.